Hurricane George was downgraded to a tropical storm Monday, but not before it did extensive damage. Hurricane-force winds battered the coast of Mississippi and Alabama. It downed trees and power lines and bounced boats on the water. These scenes are from Baldwin County, Alabama, just east of Mobile. Spiraling bands of torrential rain caused widespread flooding. Rainfall amounts in some places exceed 25 inches. Thunderstorms and occasional tornadoes remain a threat from this storm. Well, here's a look at it. Just swirling around over southern Mississippi and Alabama, spiraling some heavy rain and isolated tornadoes from the Florida Panhandle now into southwest Georgia. This area, many of our friends are having a very, very rough night. One of the aspects of the remnants of the hurricane, the intense rain, of course, and flood watches remain in effect. And another tornado watch in effect for parts of Georgia, Florida Panhandle, and southwest, make that Alabama, southwest Georgia, and the Florida Panhandle. Now, one of the reasons why we believe that the incredible amounts of rain, over 25 inches, will continue is this. Notice the yellow line going way up toward Chicago and Washington, D.C. So that leaves this low pressure area, the tropical storm, to just drift very slowly toward the east, out to the east of the circulation, the moisture coming right in from the tropics, a little drier air out to the west. That's why it's not raining tonight in New Orleans. But to the east side, the torrential rain will continue, and we could see total for the storm to 20 or 30 inches of rain. And that would be just absolutely inundating for many of us. This is just the rain that has piled up since 8 o'clock this morning. As you can see, the area shaded in orange, which is a lot, from Mississippi all the way back into Alabama and Florida. That's 5 to 6 inches, locally 8 to 10 inches. Mobile, for example, over 11 inches of rain just over the last 24 hours. This is no longer a hurricane. It is no longer a major problem as far as wind goes, but boy, it's the water. It is really the water, the heavy rain, still some rough seas out there over the Gulf of Mexico. Stu Ostro, meteorology supervisor here. Does the tropical storm, Hurricane George, what used to be a hurricane, remind you of anything else we've lived through here along the Gulf Coast?
Well, unfortunately, it's reminiscent of Tropical Storm Alberto, which, if I remember correctly, was in early July of '94. Not quite the exact same area, but the same basic part of the world. And I remember back then we saw rainfall totals of the low 20s, 21, 22 inches estimated on Doppler radar, and we were appalled and astonished, and that produced very serious flooding. And here we are again, not only radar estimated totals of 25 inches, but actual reports in rain gauges of 25 inches. And so not only do we have the flash flooding which occurred right away as the storm came in, but now river flooding. Of course, we had the storm surge flooding and the battering waves, so just a mess. The difference between Alberto and George is that George had much more wind and much more storm surge.
Now, this is a tropical cyclone, if you will, that's had quite an ominous history. As we take a look back about a week, you might want to tell us what we're looking at.
Well, right there we're looking at George when it was at its maximum wind intensity a few frames ago, when it had very visible eye. Then it caused all the problems in the leewards. Puerto Rico, even going over 10,000-foot mountains on Hispaniola, was not enough to completely disrupt its circulation. It battered Cuba, it came out in the Gulf of Mexico, and even though it never got back wind-wise to the intensity level that it was at well east of the leewards, it didn't have to still be a major weather force that unfortunately has continued to cause very severe problems.
This is the latest radar we have for you right now, showing this circulation. Obviously, back here just to the west of Mobile appears to be the center of the circulation, and you'll notice all this moisture coming in from the southeast, and in particular, as we zoom in on a Doppler radar here, what are we looking at here, Stu, with these lines of orange and yellow?
We're looking at very torrential downpours, adding more rainfall amounts on top of what's already fallen. We're also seeing very gusty winds and the potential for isolated tornadoes. If there's a couple of shreds of good news in here as far as the overall storm goes, one, the center of circulation, which had been wobbling toward the water, its energy source a little bit earlier in the evening, seems to have looped around a little more toward the east. The other is that however slowly it might be, it is moving, and at least that's a good start to get it out of the picture. Unfortunately, that movement is still, at least in the short term, very slow.
And slow movement means more heavy rain for Alabama. And once the rain moves into, well, northeast Florida and parts of Georgia, Atlanta, Macon, Augusta, the rain's going to hang around for a while, and there could be some flooding there.
Yeah, hopefully we won't see rainfall totals like what we've seen already as it moves down the line, but at least locally heavy amounts in its path.
Stu Ostro, Meteorology Supervisor, thanks again for your expertise and sound advice. And we urge you, if you're away from your television, to have a look at this tropical storm and all the advisories in association with it. You might want to track its course over the last 2 weeks. All that information is available at our online site, weather.com. Well, for a look at weather across the rest of the country and, of course, that forecast for tomorrow, back to the studio.
And Dave, as well suspected, about the only game in town is Tropical Storm George. However, we've seen a few storms developing tonight around the Kansas City metro area. We've had a few warnings out, and the general wind flow is across the north, and that's why we've had, again, another record-setting day through the mid-Atlantic. Temperatures a record-setting 95 in Raleigh-Durham. Those of you in Washington and Baltimore are wondering what happened to fall weather. Well, we go right from summer type weather into winter, or at least late fall weather. Well, that remains to be seen, but we don't see any big cool downs in this area anytime soon. We do have a little chunk of friendly high pressure. The weather's pretty nice. In fact, tomorrow another beautiful day outdoors in New York and Boston. Temperatures about 70, 75, very comfortable humidity. No complaints here, but as you move south of the stationary front, you'll run into the steam, and rain's now moving up from the south towards the Atlanta area. And fortunately, these are the areas which need some of this rainfall. Those of you I know watching from the Gulf Coast have had way too much of the tropical moisture. And yet another cool front which will swing across the map into the northeast between now and the end of the week. West Coast pretty quiet through the Intermountain West. A couple showers dying out tonight over the Lake Tahoe area, but snow levels up above 9,000 feet. So no problems driving on Interstate 80. Overnight tonight we'll have the tornado watch continuing, and we have a new watch out through the overnight hours for parts of Missouri and Kansas. That includes the KC metro area. Keep you updated with all the warnings through the overnight hours. Again, this is the big threat. The showers and thunderstorms, the heavy rains with George, and we'll have continuing coverage right on through Tuesday and Wednesday. We're going to be dealing with this for quite a few more hours. Meanwhile, the New England state's comfy tonight. Most of us, though, still sweltering. 81 right now in Little Rock. Here it is almost October this time of the night. Now, lows Tuesday morning showing the cool air in New England and through the Intermountain West. As we get into Tuesday during the day, still tropical storm George creating a lot of problems, flooding. Fortunately, the winds continue to die off, so the power crews will be able to get out and at least take care of some of the power for you. Wonderful weather day in the northeast, not bad in the upper Midwest, a few showers in the Intermountain West, and a few thunderstorms developing in the afternoon. The same system which caused some rain in the Bay Area on Sunday will move in and attract some moisture, so watch out for the rain there, and also across the lower Gulf Coast. That will be the big threat. Some of you have already had 2 feet of rain. How about 8 more inches of rain? That's why the flood watches and warnings are up. Temperatures, though, will be hot for a lot of us, especially across the southern plains. Not quite as warm in the mid-Atlantic tomorrow, and another crisp day, autumnal, in New England. Stay with us. We'll have continuing coverage on George. Next up, after your local forecast, a look at travel conditions for Tuesday morning.
Before your high-efficiency Tempstar furnace ever reaches your home, it's been put through some of the industry's toughest quality testing. Before your Tempstar tackles winter's worst, we've already added the 2 most important internal parts, heart and soul. Before it reaches the skilled hands of your Tempstar dealer, we've lived up to our heritage of quality that dates back more than 100 years. You don't have time for the whole story, but we know you love the ending. Tempstar furnaces, quality you can feel.
Call your local Tempstar dealer today and ask about the new Smart Comfort gas furnace or heat pump.
Mud holes, dirt roads. Most people wouldn't think of driving through stuff like that.
Hurricane George may be producing record flooding across much of the deep south. A hurricane spins in the central Atlantic heading for the Azores, and a typhoon heads for the coast of Korea. This is a very active tropical update. Thank you for joining us. We'll start off with a look at George, which is still stalled over South Alabama. And unexpectedly, George took a southeastward track late in the day Monday back towards the Gulf of Mexico. George is now drifting slowly to the east. It is what we call a hybrid system now, not truly tropical. It has interacted with the land, and George actually treks southeast for some time. It's kind of an unusual forecasting pattern here because we have high pressure to its east, to its west, and to its north. So it's kind of hard to get a good grasp on exactly what George is going to do. The one thing we are quite certain of is that it is going to remain nearly stationary over the next 24 hours. The actual center of the storm is now drifting east at about 8 miles per hour. It has been downgraded to a tropical storm with winds of 45 miles per hour, estimated minimum pressure at 29.29 inches, and we would expect pressures to continue to come up here into the overnight hours and into early Tuesday morning. Of course, tornadoes are frequently a problem with landfalling hurricanes, and tropical storms can spawn weak tornadoes. That is a real threat. 12 homes damaged earlier in the day Monday around Panama City. That will continue to be a threat with the remnants of George across southwestern Georgia, south central Alabama, and western Florida. That's tornado activity, not to mention the dangerous rain. In fact, record-breaking rainfall totals perhaps from George across the western panhandle of Florida and the Alabama area around the Mobile Bay area. This is Doppler radar estimated precip, and you can see over 25 inches, and we've had ground truth of well over 25 inches across south central Alabama. Tragic across the deep south as George just sits in one place. Doppler radar showing the bands of thunderstorms continuing to feed and be most active on the eastern side of George. These bright yellow colors perhaps where you want to watch for the possible formation of weak, short-lived tornadoes. A closer look towards the eye of George. We did have earlier in the day Monday the eye somewhere in this general vicinity north of Biloxi. Now it's drifted a little farther to the southeast and it's drifting slowly to the east. So George is still influencing our weather, and that highlights our tropical update. We do have another hurricane out in the Atlantic. Out in the central Atlantic, it has undergone what we call recurvature. That is, storms typically form off the west coast of Africa. They head west along the ITCZ, and at some point they curve more north and more northeast. That curve to the north and northeast is called recurvature, and this is Hurricane Jeanne, and it has actually recurved to the northeast, heading for the Azores, unfortunately. The specifics on Jeanne: at 90 miles per hour, that makes it a minimal hurricane, although still certainly something to take note of. It's moving northeast at 21 miles per hour. The estimated minimum central pressure at 28.85 inches, and pressure is expected to continue to fall with Jeanne as it moves off to the northeast. Our final stop is out in the Pacific, where now Typhoon Jeanne is heading for Korea. Here's South Korea, North Korea. Jeanne did move over the Taiwan area and, of course, caused flooding and major catastrophe around Taiwan. It lost its eye, but it has now reformed its eye north of Taiwan, continues its north-northeastward track. Now, Korea is very mountainous, and so Jeanne is expected to break up quite a lot over Korea as it heads off to the north-northeast, becomes an extratropical system. That means not a tropical system, and then it gets caught up in the westerlies. That's a look at the tropical update this morning. Stay tuned. Coming up next, we'll take a complete look at some active weather in and around Kansas City. A stormy start with 78-mile-per-hour wind gusts south of Topeka. Weather Center is next. Dave Schwartz updates us on the progress of George.
Turn a vice in your life? Well, maybe it's time to put some back.
Everybody freeze!
Now you can feel the heat again with Miami Vice on home video. Call this toll-free number now for Miami Vice, the collector's edition, and recapture all the pulse-pounding action and music you remember. Step back into life in the fast lane with two hip undercover Miami cops. Sonny Crockett.
Well, no guts, no glory.
Ricardo Tubbs.
Get out of my face!
Use your credit card and call this toll-free number now and get the premiere movie. 2 uncut hours for just $4.95 with subscription. And in case we haven't shown you in
the next couple of days, it has been a very destructive hurricane, now tropical storm. Tropical storm warnings remain in effect here right now along the central Gulf Coast from Destin, Florida, through Mobile Bay, back into New Orleans, though the winds are winding down in New Orleans, back to the mouth of the Mississippi River. That means nobody out at the beach, nobody out over the water. Now, just because this is no longer a hurricane and is a minimal tropical storm does not mean that we are out of the woods just yet. Heavy rain has produced flooding. Tornadoes are possible in parts of Alabama, Georgia, Florida, where the flood warnings are in effect and watches. Look at some of the rainfall totals. 25 inches here in the Florida Panhandle. Bay Minette across the bay from Mobile, 14.5 inches, on and on. This just in the period of 48 hours. And now the rain has reached into Birmingham and Atlanta. This is becoming a problem for those of us right along, not only along the coast, but inland. Now this hurricane, which is now a tropical storm, has been responsible for over 300 deaths. Before it hit the islands, as it moved out of the Atlantic Ocean, you could see the clearly defined eye of a 150-mile-per-hour Category 4 hurricane. Then it weakened, hit St. Kitts, crossed over Puerto Rico. Dominican Republic and Haiti were next along the line. Then it moved out over the Mona Passage, over Cuba, heavy rain there. South Florida got a blow here on Friday morning, including Key West as the eye went right over it, and then into the Gulf of Mexico where it re-intensified and headed toward Mississippi and Alabama. And that's pretty much where we find it here tonight. Now the question is, for Stu Ostro, meteorology supervisor, how long are we going to see scenes like this? Hurricane George has been causing all kinds of rough seas, bringing seawater inland here in Biloxi, Mississippi. Torrential rain and a strong storm surge combined to produce significant flooding, not only in Biloxi, but over into Alabama, here in Mobile, Alabama. Some areas are seeing more than 2 feet of rain. Local officials are warning people to avoid travel in the area because of the flooded roads, downed trees, and power lines. So that's what it hath wrought here as it hit the mainland of the United States, Stu. What are we in for the rest of tonight and Tuesday?
Well, we saw the scenes from Biloxi with the storm surge. Fortunately, the wind is now turned around to the northwest in Biloxi. The center of circulation has gone by. That will assist in pushing that water back where it came from. However, off to the east, and this is the reason one of the reasons we still have the tropical storm warning in effect, and why it's still being designated as a tropical storm. These bands right in here, and even in between the bands, the wind is pretty gusty, but we're continuing to see winds sustained in some of these bands at about 40 miles an hour with gusts to 55, so the severe beach erosion continues, and then we have the problem with the heavy rain and potentially a tornado or two within those bands as well.
A tornado warning's in effect for Geneva County, which is right in here in southeastern Alabama. Well, there's the center of the circulation, as you pointed out, just about right over Mobile, but it's edging ever so slowly toward the east. Is there anything out there that can kick this away so the rain can stop?
There is a weather system just coming into western Canada now that we're keeping our eye on. We think that eventually that's going to cause a pretty big change in the weather pattern all across the country as the month of October arrives. In the meantime, we also think there'll be just enough oomph in the atmosphere to meander the tropical storm onto the east. Even if it goes onto the east quickly from this point on, it's already caused enough problems. We've already had extreme rainfall amounts. The fact that at least through Tuesday it's going to move very slowly means more heavy rain. Wednesday will be a transition day, and then Thursday on out.
Well, it's right under one of those hot midsummer ridges.
Yeah, it's a weather pattern that you might see in, say, early June. Here's our borderline between highs in the 80s and highs in the 70s, a couple of 60s up here, 90s off to the south of that line. However, if we were to look at what's going to happen a few days from now, we would see that 80 line way down in here, and that's associated with the cold front that'll be moving on southeast. And if the tropical storm hasn't gotten out of the picture by, say, Thursday, it'll get a pretty good nudge, we think, from that.
Tropical Storm George, packing maximum sustained winds 45 miles per hour. Those are the coordinates, 20 miles west of Mobile, moving to the east at 8 miles an hour, still a flood maker, and the possibility of tornadoes the rest of tonight and Tuesday. Stu Ostro?
And a lot of rivers coming out of their banks, too, from the rains that fell earlier.
Absolutely. Some evacuations are taking place in Alabama tonight. Thanks so much for your help, your professional advice here at the Weather Channel. Where else are you going to get analysis like this as a tropical storm meanders slowly along the Gulf Coast? We watch the weather. That's all we do here on television or at our website, weather.com. Just check with us whenever you need us. And stay put tonight. There are floodwaters, there are trees and power lines down. We'll check it out when the sun comes up in the morning. Well, Scott Larimore is waiting in the studio. He's got news on some severe weather across the plains and a look at Tuesday's forecast.
David, earlier in the evening we had winds gusting in excess of hurricane strength south of Topeka, Kansas. 78-mile-per-hour winds gust with some powerful thunderstorms still showing up on Doppler radar south and west of Kansas City, continuing to move to the east and southeast. 1 3/4-inch hail, not uncommon with some of these more powerful thunderstorms. We can now see the line pushing basically north to south across Kansas City, and that's good news. Perhaps a break towards rush hour in the morning. But these storms have certainly done some damage with winds in excess of 70 miles per hour and numerous reports of 1 3/4 inch and 1